Hi, everyone. It's Sari, the Public Programs Manager at MOFAD. Thank you so much for tuning in to At the Table, our online video series about the impact of COVID-19 on the food and beverage industry. So today I'm speaking with Karina Kaufman Gutierrez. She is the Deputy Director of the Street Vendor Project. Hi, Karina. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us today.
Yeah, of course. So why don't you just kind of kick it off by telling us what Street Vendor Project is and what you do with them?
Sure. So the Street Vendor Project, we are a nonprofit, part of the Urban Justice Center. We are a membership-based organization that works to defend the rights and improve the working conditions of the approximately 20,000 people who sell food and merchandise on the streets of New York City. And so in our day-to-day work, we are striving to expand street vending as a viable and lawful employment option for folks who are immigrants and other entrepreneurs operating these micro businesses. And then also to increase public appreciation of how central street vending is to our city's culture and economy.
So I think it goes without saying that the street vendors in New York City are facing just an unimaginable amount of hardship right now, with everything that's going on with the country being shut down, and also the fact that they're almost probably all immigrants and a lot of them are undocumented. Can you just talk a little bit specifically about what's been going on from where you sit?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of our membership of folks across New York City, about 90% of street vendors are low-wage immigrant workers, and they rely on busy streets to survive. And so as the stay-at-home order, and rightfully so, is encouraging and mandating people to stay home, this unfortunately leaves people who rely on the day-to-day income to support themselves and their families without support and without income. And so, as you mentioned, a lot of folks that we work with, the majority of folks that we work with are, as small business owners and as undocumented immigrants, are ineligible for any of the benefits that have been released either at the city, state, or federal level. At the city level, there are some small business loans and grants available, but for street vendors who are either sole proprietors or operating cash-based businesses, unfortunately, a lot of folks don't have the application process is really burdensome for people who are operating on the day-to-day. And then in terms of federal stimulus checks, if you don't have a social security number, you are ineligible. And that is a direct attack on immigrant communities, and it's a direct attack on the majority of street vendors who are out and providing for our city.
To be clear, what is the percentage, I guess, of street vendors who are still operating, who are still working?
Yeah, so during the first week of when the pandemic kind of was beginning in March, most folks were continuing to work. They were taking precautions, wearing masks and wearing gloves, being the only ones to handle food and merchandise. But they were reporting that their sales were down about 90%. So there's one woman that we work with, for example. Her name is Gregoria. She sells tamales in Corona Plaza. And she was saying she'd been out for a full 6 hours and had made $7. And that has been the experience of most people. As our streets are clearing out, most people are, if they're continuing to work, have seen that their sales have gone down so much that it doesn't even make sense to continue working. For others, they have to, because they're not receiving access to benefits in any other way. So the numbers, they're going down constantly, because it's a question of people's safety. A lot of vendors are the sole caretakers of their families, and so as with other essential workers who are out, who are grocery store workers, transit workers, it's not just about their safety, it's about what they might be bringing home to their families.
I guess two questions about that. The ones that are still out there operating, how have they adapted? What kind of safety precautions have they, incorporated into their business practices? And are some of them choosing to isolate from their families because they are, so to speak, on the front lines?
Yeah, so vendors are considered essential retail under the governor's pause orders, so they can continue legally working. But in order to be ensuring their safety as well as the safety of their communities and their clientele, folks are wearing masks, wearing gloves, sanitizing their gloves constantly throughout the day or switching gloves. Um, they've adapted so that in order for there to be 6 feet of distance between people who are purchasing from them, they're either posting, like sharing their phone number so people can call ahead and just come and pick up, or they're putting up cones and tables that are identifying how people who are purchasing can be separating, or like creating that 6 feet of distance. And then I think the one other thing is, especially for people who are buying fruits and vegetables from vendors, you're so used to touching things before you buy them, same as in grocery stores. And now vendors are putting up cones and caution tape and being the only ones who touch the fruits and vegetables and then packaging them for their customers.
Yeah. Are there any specific neighborhoods in New York City where it seems like operators are having more success than in other areas?
Yeah, especially we have folks who are in East Harlem, in the Bronx, in East New York, in Corona and Jackson Heights, where oftentimes these are areas where there's not easy access to grocery stores that could be otherwise considered food deserts, and vendors are really essential in providing fresh fruits and vegetables to their neighborhoods. And so we're definitely seeing that that's where a lot of vendors are continuing to work and adapting their practices.
Have any of the vendors moved their location to try and, relocate in a neighborhood that, I don't know, they might feel is more trafficked, or, it has less grocery stores? Has there been any strategy as far as that relocation might go?
Not there have been more people who are working as vendors now who are selling fruits and vegetables in neighborhoods. We've seen more folks along like Junction Boulevard in Corona and Jackson Heights. We've actually been getting calls from people at LaFrac City asking if we can coordinate for vendors to come there.
I know you mentioned there's a couple different campaigns that the Street Vendor Project is working on right now that would benefit workers at a policy level. Can you speak to some of those initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. To speak just a little bit briefly, like about the immediate needs,
Mhm.
as an organization, we are working to coordinate meals, raise funds, mutual aid funds for folks in our immediate community who are not able otherwise to be accessing benefits. So while we're managing some of the immediate, we are also advocating at the city and state level for policies that would change and affect the benefits that are reaching not just street vendors, but all folks who are in the informal economy. So day laborers, nail salon workers, other folks who otherwise are really not getting anything and have no systems of support. So one of those, the first demand that we're strongly working on is for there to be cash assistance to all individuals and families, regardless of immigration status. Um, this and within that, the deployment of resources, we're advocating for community-based organizations to be involved in how that happens, because we have direct relationships with families who are otherwise not connected to public resources, to ensure people are really able to access it and aware. A second one that we're working on is ensuring that all incentives to small businesses include street vendors. Again, as we spoke about at the beginning, there's loans, grants, other legal protections, but it's often not available to cash economy workers or other informal workers. And oftentimes the information is only shared in English, or it has these extensive application requirements that you can only fill out online. which for people who are not comfortable with online usage, this has proven to be a huge barrier. So we're advocating not just for the incentives to include street vendors, but for there also to be a hotline for people to be able to call and apply online, and ensuring that the burden of proof of loss of income isn't falling on entrepreneurs. The third demand that we're advocating for is forgiveness of all outstanding fines that have been issued in 2020 on street vendors, because we're seeing across the country parking fees, late filing fees have been dismissed, but nothing for street vendors or other small businesses that may have been fined over the last few months. The fourth demand that we're working on is that we're calling for immediate suspension of street vendor violations that do not impact health and safety. We're seeing still that the NYPD is violently targeting street vendors across the city, no matter their age. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but this past weekend there was a video that went viral of an NYPD officer who grabbed a young boy who was 10 years old, separated him from his mother, and this was because he was selling chips and candy. His family they don't have a home right now. They're in a shelter. This is the only way that they're able to provide for themselves. And this type of police violence is not an isolated incident. We have spoken to other vendors across the city who have been approached by police, have been fined for having their customers touch fruit. And it's like, is this really where the focus is going? Really? This is criminalizing people who don't have the funds to support themselves otherwise.
I mean, can we unpack that for a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in New York for, over 20 years. I feel like street vendors, like in so many major cities, are so integral to just the cultural fabric of what New York City is. I don't know why there's so much animosity from the police towards street vendors. It seems so there's such an aggressive targeting towards them, and it's not just that they're immigrants, maybe, because there's lots of immigrants in New York City working in all different kinds of fields. Like, why do you think that street vendors are the target of so much harassment from the NYPD?
I think a lot of it's about accessibility. Vendors are their whole point of being accessible to communities buying from them makes them visible, makes them on street corners working. And to be honest, I don't know why NYPD has constantly singled out vendors for their work, except for there's like the biggest folks who are against street vendors are real estate often. And I think we see the power of real estate come into play and through how NYPD is enforcing vendors, but then also about, again, the accessibility of vendors themselves.
So, the different asks that you just outlined, how optimistic do you feel? How realistic are these requests?
I would say in terms of cash assistance for individuals and families, I do feel optimistic because we are seeing cities from Minneapolis to Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. take steps to create funds for excluded workers. And I'm optimistic that New York City or New York State, with appropriate pressure, will make a movement on this. In terms of incentives to small businesses to include street vendors, I think at the city level we have more power. I don't feel optimistic that at the federal level this is going to change. It's the compounded not understanding how street vendors work, never including street vendors as small businesses, and then also not caring for immigrant communities. And that's compounded with street vendors. In terms of immediate suspension of enforcement for street vendor violations, we have organized with 8 city council members to call on the mayor to immediately halt and suspend NYPD enforcement. So this has been a battle that we're fighting constantly. NYPD should never have any place, not just now in the pandemic, but ever, in regulating people for selling food and merchandise. And so I'm potentially optimistic that at least during the pandemic we can get something. If we're giving, like, not charging people parking fines, how dare the city be charging or levying fines on street vendors? And so I'm optimistic, and I'm hoping that, with all of these demands that we're making now in the immediate, that they are paving the way for long-term change. I think we're also at a moment and an opportunity where people are seeing the injustices that exist in our society in a very crystal clear way that maybe they haven't seen before. And this is an opportunity to be advocating for short-term and long-term change.
And so far, you haven't received any answers from the mayor's office?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think there just needs to be more noise about it. It's just like making that comparison to the parking thing. It's like, well, thousands and thousands of New Yorkers started screaming because it, impacted them personally. And I think a lot of people have trouble, understanding why they should get involved if it doesn't impact their own lives. So we just have to figure out a way to rally around, all of the street vendors and make noise to the point where, the mayor can't ignore it anymore. And I guess on that note, the question is how do we get involved? Like, what are the best ways to support street vendors right now?
Yeah, I think social media is playing an amazing role in responses to what's going on right now. And I know the mayor has a tweet going around, #AskMyMayor. If people can be tweeting, "Ask my mayor, what are you doing to support street vendors?" and highlighting that vendors aren't included in any sort of benefit right now. I think that's one direct way that people can be influencing and creating that noise and that energy. And then in terms of mutual aid, if folks are in the position to be sharing, or if they're salaried, if they're in the position to be sharing with other folks who, again, are excluded from other benefits, we do have a Gofundme operating right now, and folks can access it at bit.ly/streetvendorfund. And all proceeds from that will go directly to families. We're looking to support at least 250 folks with $300 debit cards.
I saw that you guys created a link when stimulus checks start coming for New Yorkers, if people want to donate theirs to workers, which is a wonderful idea. What's the link and what's the idea around if you don't necessarily need a stimulus check right now to donate it to a street vendor?
Yeah, I think it's the idea around it is that this is not charity. This is advocating for collective survival for all people who are excluded to be able to be sharing in this as well. And so we are asking folks who are salaried or in a position to donate to share their stimulus checks with organizations like Street Vendor Project or other organizations that work with undocumented folks across the city. So New York State Youth Leadership Project, Laundry Workers Center, Unlocal Inc. These are all organizations that folks can donate directly to. And so the link for it is bit.ly/streetvendorpledge. And so you can pledge it there. As you wait to see your bank account go up, then you can make the pledge and then donate directly, and we'll follow up with you about that.
That's great. What do you see? What do you think the future is going to look like for street vendors in New York City? How are things going to change? Is there going to be, recovery? I'm sure it's going to impact a lot of people's lives in irreparable ways.
Yeah, I think there have been some, I want to highlight maybe some good things that will come out of it to start with. So one amazing outcome of this has been the community among vendors that has formed, because so often people are working such long hours, they're independent, they're essentially independent businesses, so they're not necessarily working with other folks. It can be at times hard to be creating this community across the 5 boroughs. But in these times when people are at home and not working, there's more opportunities for folks to be engaging with each other. So we have active WhatsApp chats. We have an active closed Facebook group for vendors where people are sharing information and connecting with each other in a way that they may not have. And this is across languages. It's folks are most comfortable in Arabic, Spanish, Mandarin, and Bangla. And so as an organization, we're translating messages from each other through virtually, and that has been exciting to see those connections be forming. And another amazing long-term outcome that's been coming out of this is that we've really been seeing the restaurant industry supporting street vendors as part of the food ecosystem. So there's a number of restaurants, Egg, Gertie's, and Olmsted, as well as Lancaster Farm, who actually come together and are weekly preparing meals and groceries and delivering them to street vendors across New York City in their homes. And that has been a really beautiful connection. And I think reinforces again, like the essential role that street vendors play in our food culture in New York City. In terms of long-term impacts that are not positive, I think a lot of families are just, at this moment, they're struggling to put food on their table. They're struggling to be able to have any sort of, they don't have savings because they work day to day at the moment. Like, they don't have savings to be thinking about how they're even going to pay rent on May 1st. People were struggling in April. How is May going to work? So we're actively involving people in the cancel rent campaign to ensure that folks do not have to pay rent. And I think that's going to be a big issue as people restart their businesses. You know, you have to invest in the ingredients and the products that you're selling, and people don't have that capital to be doing that right now.
Karina, how has your job changed, and how has Street Vendor Project as an organization changed since the city shut down?
It's changed wildly. A lot of our work is generally outside of this is advocacy. You know, so much street outreach. That's a huge part. Is that we're going and meeting people where they're at, and then holding in-person meetings at our offices at the Urban Justice Center. And so much of it is based on human-to-human connection. Like in person, that has hugely changed. And so we are all becoming virtual, I don't know, we're trying to become virtual experts. We're trying to figure out virtual simultaneous translation. We are working heavily, we've always worked heavily in coalitions, but we're relying on our coalitions even more now, so we can create policy that is immediately responding to the exclusions that we're seeing that are directly affecting our members. So I think that rapidness in place of crisis, unfortunately, is something that's familiar to us at the Street Vendor Project, because we're always operating from working with our community members are the most marginalized, along with others in the city, but so we're always operating from a place of crisis. This is a little bit more intense though, because it's a virtual shift.
So tell us how we can follow along with Street Vendor Project virtually, online. We can help, share, retweet, yell at the mayor, etc.
Yes, so always You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. On Twitter, we are Vendor Power. On Facebook and Instagram, it's Street Vendor Project. And we're sharing ways and highlighting the stories of our members as well through our social media. And then if you can be tweeting at the mayor with the hashtag #AskMyMayor and asking what he's doing to support street vendors, knowing that the answer right now is not much, and perhaps suggesting ways as well that this can be, advising him on how it can be changed.
Yeah. And can you just give us the link for that GoFundMe page one more time?
Yes, our GoFundMe is bit.ly/street vendor fund.
Great. Karina, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And on behalf of MOFAD, thank you to your whole organization and to all the street vendors out there. And we are certainly rooting for them. And we'll do our best to support you as much as we can.
Thank you so much for having us today and for sharing in this dialogue. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Stay safe. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.